You can turn anything into a good story. Every day you experience moments of triumph and failure, from confronting your micromanaging boss to accidentally stealing your best friend's lunch. With a few small tweaks, you can transform these tiny moments into awesome narratives. To prove it, I'm going to use these 6 story elements to turn making a sandwich into an epic adventure. Part 1. Desire. Desire is the most universal human experience. It doesn't matter if you're a multimillionaire or a bum on the street. You want something you don't have. Every story starts with an unmet desire. It's the call to action that drives the story forward. For example, I had just arrived home from a long day at the office. I was starving. All I wanted was a tuna sandwich with pickles, raisins, and just a touch of mayo. The sandwich is now the goal that compels my actions. Part 2. Obstacle. Once we know what the character wants, the next step is to put an obstacle in their path. This is where the magic of story happens. We don't like stories because of the happy endings. We want to see a character struggle against a worthy foe. We want to see the tactics and strategies they adopt and the choices they make. We want to see them fail, fall, and rise again. I laid out the ingredients on the kitchen counter. I could practically taste the sandwich as I tried to twist off the lid of the pickle jar, without success. I tried again, straining my entire body to open that jar of pickles, and it didn't budge a bit. Part 3. Perspective. Controlling the audience's perspective is the most powerful skill a storyteller can have. Most people assume that a good story needs a truly amazing desire and a devastating obstacle to be compelling. This couldn't be farther from the truth. Life isn't full of monsters and treasure chests. If I asked you what the biggest problem in your life is right now, it's probably not some terrifying evil or destructive foe. It's your whiny boss, or your friend who never returns your calls. In the grand scheme of things, these might be small issues, but they are utterly compelling to you. Your task as a storyteller is to shift the audience's perspective so they see what you see and feel what you feel. My 2 favorite methods to shift the audience's perspective are analogy and infusion. With analogy, you take the current narrative and compare it to a similar situation that's a lot more dramatic. For example, I once wrote a short story about blowing my diet. I was at home alone and I couldn't stop thinking about the box of cookies I had in the cupboard. To change the perspective of the story, I described the box of cookies as a siren, tempting me to crash into the rocks of weak will and obesity. At the end of the story, when I gave in and started eating the cookies, I described the siren's triumphant laughter when she knew she had broken me. The real story is that I failed my diet, but for the audience, I had been conquered by a malicious evil. If you don't want to use analogy, the other method is to infuse the situation with more weight. Going back to my epic quest to make a tuna sandwich, saying I struggled to open a jar of pickles isn't very compelling. But if I tell you, after the shitty day I'd had, it felt like that pickle jar held the last vestiges of my competence. If I couldn't open that pickle jar, it would prove I wasn't an adult, I was incapable of being alive, and I was unworthy of the woman I loved. What had just been a pickle jar now represents my competence and strength as a human being. When it comes to perspective, the actual size of the obstacle doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how your audience sees it. Part 4. Scene. We all know the idea of the story arc. The narrative builds up to a moment of climax and then tumbles down to the end, where I triumphantly eat my sandwich or fail miserably and order a pizza. What often isn't discussed is the thousands of tiny stories within the bigger narrative. The big desire is the tuna fish sandwich, but each goal and obstacle between me and that sandwich is its own baby story with its own little arc. Trying to find a clean knife is a desire. Realizing the dishwasher hasn't run is the obstacle, and deciding whether or not to wash a knife or stab a filthy blade into my mayonnaise is a moment of climax. In his book, Save the Cat, the screenwriter and author Blake Snyder described it like this. Think of each scene as a mini-movie. It must have a beginning, middle, and an end. And it must also have something happen that causes the emotional tone to change drastically, either from positive to negative or from negative to positive. A short anecdote might only have 1 or 2 scenes in it. What is important is that there is an emotional switch from one extreme to the other. I stood transfixed, terrified that something as small as a pickle jar would end me. But then, elation. If I ran the lid under hot water, it would expand. I may not be strong enough to open the pickle jar with brute force, but it would collapse under the heft of my intellect. The emotional shift keeps the story engaging. Part 5. Therefore and But. If you already know this classic advice from the creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, skip this section. Most amateur storytellers connect the events of their stories with a plodding series of and-thens. For example, I tried to open the pickle jar, and then I put it under hot water, and then I tried to pry it open with a knife, and then I banged the lid against the counter. And then is lifeless. The character is moving through a laundry list of events instead of making choices and reacting to the obstacles in front of them. Instead, give your story a sense of continuity by connecting each scene with a but or a therefore and all their synonyms. I tried one last time to open the jar with my own strength, but it didn't budge. So I ran the lid under hot water, hoping it would cause the metal to expand, and tried again. Again, I failed. As a last resort, I grabbed a knife and tried to pry the lid open. Yet again, the pickles remained trapped. Using and thens make the story feel like a long, straight highway. Using therefores pulls the story forward, and using but changes the direction of the story in unexpected ways. Part 6. Conclusion. People like stories with happy endings. As a rule of thumb, if your story ends on a bad note, it isn't finished yet. When you're turning events into stories, make sure they end happily. Or if they end in failure, make sure you learn something positive. I stood above the wet mass of pickle jars and broken glass. I had failed. In my final attempt to extract the pickles, the jar had slipped through my fingers. For one brief moment, I felt a wave of shame. I had lost. The jar had defeated me and proven my utter incompetence. Then another thought came to my mind. In its sick desire to defeat me, the jar had ended its own life. It was dead, yet I remained. I laughed triumphantly and ordered a pizza. And that's it. Using these 6 elements, you can turn anything into a compelling story.